let us get started with today's Chumash. So it's an interesting Chumash and a very interesting Tanya today. So look forward to learning it together with you. So we're actually reviewing Parsha Shmini, this Torah portion. So we are going to we're ahead, I guess you could say, in the learning because we are reviewing the Parsha. We are holding, I believe it was either Wednesdays or Thursday sections. So let's skip ahead here to Thursday section. And I believe next week's Parsha is a double portion. So being that we're ahead, we'll stay ahead and then we'll start the following Torah portion together. Anyway, so there's a very interesting story that takes place here. So we have to just recap and remember yesterday's Chumash, and then we'll understand what's going on. We'll have to learn today's Chumash with the Rashis because really it's hard to understand from the verses. You must have Rashi in today's class to understand what's going on. So here we go. So recap from yesterday's or the previous Chumash. Remember what happened. So it's the first day of Rosh Chodesh. It's the first day of the inauguration of the temple where Aaron is serving as the priest, right? Moses built it up for 7 days. And now it's Aaron's turn, and Moses brought all the sacrifices. And now Aaron is the acting Kohen. Aaron serves on the 8th day. The Mishkan is rebuilt for the 8th time. It's the first day of Rosh Chodesh. It's a year since the Jews leave Egypt. And finally, God sends a fire down from heaven, clearly showing that he accepts the Jews' shul, the Jews' synagogue, and he accepts the sacrifices that the Jewish people are bringing. And lo and behold, on that day, one of the greatest tragedies happens to the Kohanim who are serving in the temple at that time, and Aaron loses 2 of his sons. And the question is, all of a sudden, it's frantic. Like I guess, in a shul, sometimes there'll be like a question, like God forbid the Torah is not kosher. You scramble. What do you do? It's like nobody knows what to do. You know what I mean? Like it's confusing because it's not a normal question that you usually get. So people are scrambling and they're like, what do we do? What do we? Aaron is now a mourner. He's now sitting shiva, or worse, he's an onen. He didn't even bury his son yet. And Moses says, the show must go on. You are acting as, this is literally the first day of the inauguration of the temple. You don't understand. You guys forgive the Jews for any sin that they've done. You cannot leave your post. You cannot go away. You must stay on the post and you must stay with us. You cannot move out. We need you here. I know your son passed away. We'll all mourn your son and you must keep on going and doing as needs to be done. But the question then arises, are there halachic changes? An onen, a guy whose son passed away, is not allowed to act as a Kohen. He's not allowed to serve in the temple. He has to go out. He has to actually become a regular Kohen, has to become impure to his relatives. He has to go to the funeral. What are you doing here? So Moses says, at like this, they have a conundrum. What do you do? Moses says to Aaron, listen, the meal offering, God told me to tell you that the meal offering that we're bringing special for the inauguration of the day, you must eat it. You already sacrificed it. You must eat the sacrifice. I'm sorry, you lost your brother. Remember, we discussed that whole situation, but you must eat the sacrifice because you're eating it forgives the Jewish people. But here's where the confusion comes in, okay? Here's where confusion comes in. The problem is that Aaron did not give complete instructions about everything. And there's almost a debate here even in understanding between Aaron and Moses. And what's the debate? Let me just discuss the debate with you and then we'll see it inside. Here's the debate between the great Moses, who hears the words from God, and Aaron, who's a very holy person too, who's hearing his younger brother Moses giving the instructions from God. They actually differ. And this is a good example of how could you have difference of opinion if Moses heard the Torah from God. This is a very good way of understanding it actually today's Chumash. So again, let's just keep the facts. Let's get the facts down and then we'll understand what the debate is at, okay? Here are the facts. The facts are that Moses told Aaron, Moses told Aaron, you have to eat the meal offering. A meal offering is a special sacrifice that's brought specifically for the 8th day of building the Mishkan, the first day that Aaron is serving to bring godliness into the temple. So Moses says, you got to eat that meal offering. But you know what the question is? What about the other sacrifices that are not unique sacrifices to today? They are sacrifices not unique to today's day for the inauguration of the temple. What about the sacrifices that's brought every Rosh Chodesh? Because it's the first day of the month of Nisan, which means that it's not just the first day of the inauguration of the temple, the culmination of it, but it's also just Rosh Chodesh. So should Aaron eat those sacrifices too? Because Moses told him to eat the other ones. Or should Aaron burn this one? Because this is just a regular monthly sacrifice. And usually the rule is that it should be burnt. And when Aaron was told by God that he should eat the sacrifice, even though he's in a state of tremendous mourning. It was only a rule just regarding the specific sacrifices for the day, but not for all the other sacrifices that are brought on a regular daily or monthly basis. Okay, so Moses starts getting all nervous at Aaron, and in my head, I'll give you a reason. I didn't see all the commentaries, but Moses is probably also nervous. I'm going to add something. My own thought is that we just had two of your sons die from not following the directions exactly, and all of a sudden, people are not following directions again. And this is very scary, probably, I could imagine. This is very scary to Moses that they're not following directions. Here we go. You're going to see this inside. And Moses is going to basically tell Aaron and his sons, he's going to start questioning, really tough, questioning his sons. Why did you burn the sacrifices brought for Rosh Chodesh, for the beginning of the new month? And he's going to get very nervous. He's going to question him. Why did you do that? How could you do this? And Aaron's going to say, Moses, calm down. The directions you gave us was about specifically the unique sacrifices that was once in a lifetime, just once in history, just for today's day, that we have to eat those. But that doesn't mean that God wants us to eat everything else. And Moses says, you know what? You're right. And Moses admitted that Aaron was wrong. So it's fascinating. Moses is the one teaching Torah from God to the Jewish people. And Aaron questions, and Moses assumed that it means that all the sacrifices need to be eaten. But he was never told that by God. When Moses told Aaron that God wants you to eat this unique meal offering that's made for specifically today, Aaron says, no, I don't assume it's for everything else, and therefore I'm going to burn it. I'm not going to eat it because I am a mourner and I'm not allowed to eat it. And Moses comes questioning him, and Aaron says to Moses, did God ever tell you clearly that all sacrifices need to be eaten? Or was that your assumption that all sacrifices need to be eaten? What you told me in the original message was that God only said that the unique sacrifices for today need to be eaten. That's once in history need to be eaten, but it doesn't mean we need to eat everything else. And Moses says, you know what, Aaron, you're right. Okay, let's see that inside. We'll see this very fascinating debate between two of the greatest people in history, Moses and his brother, and Moses accepts that he's wrong. And what's so fascinating to me about it is Moses is the one even giving the information. But there still are places where Moses is making assumptions. There's what he clearly heard from God, and then there could be assumptions, and that's debatable. Those assumptions could be debatable by other people. What you heard from God, you heard from God. It's not a question. But what Moses is then calculating is subject to debate. Let's see what happens. And the sin offering, which means there were a number of sin offerings we've learned in the last few days of the class. This is the sin offering of Rosh Chodesh, which means, as we'll see in Rashi, once a month, every month, Rosh Chodesh would come and they would bring a goat, a special goat for a sin offering. You know what it would forgive? God forbid if there were anyone impure in the temple, it's a very holy place, you can't sin. This would forgive for any mistakes the Kohanim might have made in the temple, or people might have made with unholy sacrifices, which would be a horrible, and the consequences would be terrible. So just in case, God forbid, there was a impure sacrifice in the temple, once a month they would bring a goat on Rosh Chodesh forever to forgive the whole month that they should be forgiven. But the problem here is Moses just told them, I want you to eat the sacrifices, and Aaron and his sons go and they burn the Rosh Chodesh offering. So Darash Moshe. Moshe starts questioning. He says, what did you guys do? How come you guys burnt the sacrifice? I told you in yesterday's Chumash that you need to eat it, right? I told you need to eat the meal offering. And you burnt it. And God says, you are the Kohanim, do not leave the temple. I know you're mourning, but we need you to serve in the temple. Now, this Rashi brings this actually debate here in understanding why exactly the Kohanim burnt the sacrifice. Some say that another different violation happened over here, which is another conversation. It's an interesting conversation. Some say that it was because it became impure, and the sacrifice that becomes impure has to be burnt. But other people say, and a lot of Rashi is going to follow this method of thinking, is that they were mourners and they burnt it. So Moses is, based on that, Moses is questioning, I told you to eat it, why'd you burn it? And he even got angry, it says. Moses got angry, imagine that. And he starts screaming on Aaron's two sons, Elazar and Isamar, Bnei Aaron, who were the children of Aaron, Hanoisrim, the remaining ones, the leftover ones, right? The two are left. The first two made a mistake. Now he's scared that the second two made a mistake. And he starts screaming at them, saying, tell me an answer. I want to know why you burnt it. I told you to eat it. Even though you're mourners, you have to eat it. And Rashi says something interesting here, is that really Moses was supposed to be angry at his brother, but the problem was it's his older brother. So who did he scream at? He screamed at Aaron's kids. He was really talking to Aaron, but he's screaming at Aaron's children. Now, very interesting. I'll give you an example where this happens. Which I've used this before, this Rashi. In Shul, there may be sometimes, unfortunately, people who sit and talk very loud. They talk and they disturb the whole Shul. Now, it's not nice sometimes for me to to say something to them, they'll get very offended. So I'll start telling my kids, shh, quiet, it's a shul, don't speak in the shul, and hoping it's one of the tricks that maybe sometimes I've been in an uncomfortable situation and I have to say something, but I don't know how to say. So I'll scream at my kids, but I really mean that other person that's there. Hopefully they won't get too offended. Hopefully they'll get the message. If that doesn't work, we'll have to go to the next method. But sometimes it's idea. So Moses is screaming at Aaron's sons, but he really means Aaron because the kids obviously do whatever their father, the high priest Aaron, told him to do. But he's really upset at Aaron, but he can't scream at his older brother, who's a very holy person. So out of honor, he tells the children. And he says, I want to answer. Why did you burn it? You were supposed to eat it. And here's the verse in 17. Why did you not eat the sin offering? What was the reason? What went wrong? Why did you? I told you to eat it, the sin offering. The people become, this is, and by the way, I think the goat was a very important sin. There was a few sin offerings. There was a goat that was made for the forgiveness of the golden calf. I mean, that's a thing. Maybe the calf. I think there was a number of things going on here that was being brought. And here he's saying this goat's very important. It's forgiven for any impurity that it goes. Now, why did you not eat it? It could be, you have another excuse. Did it maybe, remember we learned that it's not allowed to leave the courtyard of the temple. And if the animal leaves the courtyard of the temple and comes back in, it's disqualified. Is that the reason why you didn't eat it? Maybe that's why you didn't eat it, because it went out of, it's not allowed to leave the courtyard of the temple, went out, now you burnt it. So, because it has to be eaten in a holy place, it's holy of holies, and it went out. Is that why you didn't eat it? Is that your excuse? Is that your reason why you burnt it instead of eating it? God gave you the sin offering. You must eat it. Why must you eat it? Because that's how the Jewish people get forgiven, by you eating it. The kohanim, the holy tzaddikim, the kohanim eat the sacrifice of the Jewish people. And so on, and that's how the Jewish people then forgive it. And you burnt it instead of eating it. To forgive them for Hashem. So how come you didn't eat it? Now Moses says, well, maybe this. So is there an excuse that it went out of the courtyard? Well, if that's not your excuse, why did you burn it and not eat it? He says, did you do another mess up on it that you burnt it? What could the other mess up be? Remember, we said that all the blood of the sin offering is sprinkled on the outer altar. And if you remember, we learned this in Rashi in the verse a while ago, that if you bring the blood inside the actual Mishkan and the actual tabernacle, when it's not supposed to, only very few bloods of sacrifices are brought inside the actual Mishkan. All the other bloods are brought on the outer altar in the courtyard. You brought it in, that disqualifies. So is that your reason why you burnt it instead of eating it? Because you brought the blood inside? You should have eaten it. So if you don't have that excuse that it was brought outside the walls, and you don't have the excuse that the blood was brought inside, you should have eaten it. Even if you're and if your excuse is that you're mourners, I already told you very clearly, even though you're mourning, you must eat the sacrifice. So Aaron is watching Moses scream at his two children, call them out by name. And Aaron knows it was him who advised it. So Aaron, who's going to answer? So Aaron answers here. That's how Aaron gets involved in the picture, because he knows Moses really means him. But Aaron and Moshe. So Aaron responds to Moses. And he says, Moses, calm down. You're making a mistake, my dear younger brother. The holy Moshe Rabbeinu, you're making a mistake over here in your calculation, right? I'm explaining it based on Rashi. We need the Rashi to understand exactly what's going on over here. So Aaron says to Moshe, we brought today the sacrifice, right? We burnt it. And I am the high priest. I am the one who brought it, which means that when a high priest, even if he lost family, even if he's mourning, even if he sprinkled the blood after he became a mourner, in other words, when did they sprinkle the blood? Before he lost his children or after he lost his children? He says, look, the high priest, everything, he has a trump card, meaning that when he's allowed to sprinkle the blood, no matter what kind of mourner he is, anything he does is kosher, any situation he's in, the sacrifice, not anything, but even if he's in mourning, he's allowed to bring it. So he said, Moses, even if I would have sprinkled it before my children died or after my children died, when I became a mourner and I went and I sprinkled the blood, we're allowed to eat it. This is not, I'm sorry, that does not disqualify the sacrifice because I brought it as a mourner. Don't scream at my kids. I'm the one who brought it, and the complaints are to me, and my children are not answering, not because they're embarrassed of you or because they're scared of you or they're sensitive people and they're ashamed, as Rashi explains. No, they let out of honor for their father. The kids had a good answer. They could have just told Moses, that's what our dad told us to do. Stop screaming at us. They didn't say anything. Aaron looked at his brother Moses and says, what do you, Moses, calm down. I don't know if he said calm down, but he said, look, let's make the calculation here. I'm the one who brought the sacrifice, not my children. And when the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, me, brings the sacrifice, either mourning or I'm not mourning, it's always kosher. He says, but Moshe, listen to what you're saying. Listen, Moses, my dear brother, to what you're saying. You told us to eat the meal offering that was a once in a lifetime, once in history sacrifice. That does not mean that every sacrifice that we bring today, ones that are reoccurring every month, we should be eating, even though we're mourners. Would that have been good in God's eyes? So why are you making an assumption, as Rashi explained, just because God told you that this is the rule, this is the case for the meal offerings, that's a once in a history meal offering that it needs to be eaten? Why do you assume God would still want us to eat all the others, all the offerings too? It's not a good calculation. That's why Rashi explains the verse here. He says, Vayishma Moshe, so Moshe heard, Vayita be'einav, and it was good in his eyes. He admitted, Moses says he made a mistake, and he wasn't embarrassed, and he didn't say he didn't hear. I just want to say, like an outcome of this chumash, it's very interesting, fascinating chumash, but beautiful chumash today. But I do want to, what I want to say is this is why there could be subject to debate from Mount Sinai. My son Dove actually started wearing tefillin today, okay? And we put on, whoever's davening with us at Chabad on Shachris will notice that we put on 2 pairs of tefillin. We put on a Rashi pair and a Rebbeinu Tam pair. Where does this debate come from? And a very interesting question is, why don't we know what tefillin Moshe wore and what tefillin his son or his student Joshua wore? Why is there sometimes debates that should be so obvious from Moses? And the answer is interesting, very interesting answer we find from today's Chumash, is that God could have told Moses, I want the tefillin as he did. God told 10 rules in the tefillin, actually. I want them to be black color. I want them to be square, right? They have to be corners. They have to be very square. I want them to be made out of leather. And he also said, I want these 4 Torah portions to be in them. Shema, V'hoya, and so on. But he didn't tell him the order was subject to debate between, maybe God didn't say as clear as he said the other things, and therefore there could have been an original debate in how to understand originally what God said. Could have been Joshua could have debated with Moses or someone else. Said, look, this is what God said, but God didn't tell you that piece of information. That's your assumption. And therefore people could argue with Moses, not in what Moses clearly heard, but then how they can make the calculation after Moses heard what he heard. And that's what Aaron is telling Moses, you're right what you heard, but you're incorrect in the calculation that you made after this thing. And Moses admitted to Aaron in the Torah that his calculation he followed up with was not a correct calculation. That is today's very fascinating, interesting chumash. Any questions or comments on today's chumash before we get into ideas and meditation in today's Tanya? Yeah. Any questions or comments, or everyone good? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Brad.
All right. So was this part? I just want to get my timeline correct. Was this part written by Moshe in the Torah before he made the mistake?
Oh, I don't know. Probably not. I don't know. I don't. You're correct in saying that they wrote it after they got the Torah. They kept on writing it, but when or how, I'm not sure.
Right, and I just wanted to be familiar with how his approach was, because, like you said, like I could understand, like someone giving you instructions on how to take care of an animal or something, and then you when you go to do it, you're like, wait, what, do I do it this way or do I do it that way? Right. And I get that, but if someone tells me, hey, you're going to screw this up, I then will, it's going to grab my attention.
The Torah was written after the story happened, I think.
Okay.
It was almost like a diary, I guess. Like Hashem told Moshe what to write, but I think as the stories happened, then Moshe wrote them down. Not every story, only the stories that God told him to write down.
But obviously Moshe also said to him that, hey, there's going to be, you're not going to get everything right, even though I'm giving you this inside information.
That's in the Torah, right?
Right. Okay. So I just want to make sure I understand how that tracks.
It's showing someone the greatest, in a way, like a lesson you can learn from that is no matter how great of a teacher you are, the Torah is telling you what a good character trait is to say, I made a mistake.
Well, he's the most humble. So, I mean, but that's kind of the thing is that, I just wanted to understand how that how to navigate that approach. So
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. So he didn't know. I don't think he knew that he was going to make that mistake. He actually made that mistake, and Aaron corrected him. And Moses said, "You're right." And Rashi says, "Oh, there's a beautiful lesson here. We see, learn from Moses again. The best teacher. Moses is the greatest teacher ever. You know, he's a teacher of Torah. He admitted his mistake. So you don't want a teacher that doesn't make mistakes. You know what I mean? You want a teacher that could admit. Everybody makes mistakes, I guess, but you want a teacher that could admit his mistake. That's probably that's what we think.
Well, that goes to the common motif or theme about Moshe being humble.
Humble
Moshe
guy,
being
right? But we also learned the other
so
day.
modest, and a teacher, that means you take new information, you allow your students to be correct, you don't get up on ego, and so
right.
very beneficial.
By the way, it's very interesting. You're right, because I'm just thinking in leadership today, like in leadership in the world. We had this a few parshas ago when we started learning. 2 parshas ago, we started learning Vayikra, the Chumash Vayikra. We had a very interesting thing in Chumash Vayikra. It said that the first it says if all the sins of sin offering, and the first people it talks about by sin offering is if a Kohen sins, and then the Beth Din, the leadership sins, and gets all the Jews to sin, and then it says the leader of the Jewish people sin, the Nasi, the leader sins, and then when the leader sees he made a mistake, he admits his mistake on his own, and he brings a sacrifice. And Rashi says, praise is a generation that has a leader that is comfortable enough to admit his mistake, that he'll be honest that he made a mistake. You know, like in
Hey, you brought up politics on this.
I'm saying, like, I'm not saying one-sided. I don't want to bring up, but I think it's a very powerful lesson. I think today you'll almost never hear a politician, or maybe some leaders are scared to say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake."
No, you do.
I would actually think that, to me, if I saw somebody saying they made a mistake, I would have more respect for the person, not less. And that's what the Torah is telling us, is that, you know, in leadership, it's don't look at someone that doesn't make mistakes. Look at because everybody makes mistakes. Look at someone that admits their mistakes. That could be that's a good leader.
Well, that's because the other side will say they're flip-flopper, but that's like you're saying, it's getting into politics.
But that's pretty right. But that's pretty sad that we can't say you're right. So politically, it might destroy them. But what does that say about us? What does it say about people that if somebody says they made a mistake, then they'll be vilified? Like, how would it look like if
I agree.
Somebody went over to someone and says, "Listen, you did this wrong. You made this thing wrong." You're like, you know what? I used the best sense I had. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I apologize. I really apologize. And you think the guy really apologizes. And by the way, in the Chumash, the example was given is that he apologized on his own. Nobody forced the leader to apologize. He went on his own. He said, I have news to tell you. I made a mistake. Would people have more respect for the person or less respect for the person? Torah is saying you're very lucky if you have a leader that can admit his mistake without people having to tell him. Anyway, beautiful. I think a beautiful message in today's Chumash, and when we learned about this a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, very good question, Brad. Anybody else have any questions or comments on today's Chumash? Yes.
Quick question. Is that an accurate translation? And Moses heard and it pleased him. Is that accurate?
The word is Vayishma Moshe. Moshe heard Vayita Beinav. It was good in his eyes. Is the exact translation. It means that he approved. Rashi just adds, it was good in his eyes. In other words, he agreed. I think the correct, if you would ask me just on my own, he agreed with Aaron's interpretation. He says, you know what, you're right. You were right. You did right. In other words, your excuse was a good excuse. I heard your defense. First of all, Moses also asked them. I think that's also a very good thing in life. When you see someone doing something wrong, ask them. It's the best thing to do. They didn't listen to you. So don't just attack them. You ask a question. You actually say, you know what, it bothers me very much. And Moses says he was even angry. It says the word Vayiktzayv. Moses got angry, and he says, and he said, why? He questioned him. He says, tell me, I want an answer. He says, he didn't stop asking. Tell me the answer why you did it. And the kids are like, they didn't say anything, but in their heads are like, our dad told us to do it, but they didn't know what to do. They're stuck between their father and and Moshe, and they were just quiet. And Aaron stood up and he says, this is the reason for it. And Moshe heard it. He said, "You're right." He said, "You're right. Your calculation was correct. You did right." Moses agreed to Aaron that he did it right.
Is there other words throughout the Torah? If somebody was wrong, would they always use it was good in his eyes or it pleased him, or was it?
They do. Vayita ve'enov. We do use the word vayita ve'enov. Where else do we have Vayitav Ve'enav? I think we have it elsewhere. I think between Moshe and Hashem. I'm not sure. I have to find that thing, but I believe we do have it elsewhere. I believe why, Gregory? What are you trying to get at?
Why particularly it was good in his eyes, not say, another phrase or something else. Like why particularly it was good in his eyes. You know what I mean? And
Here,
I
I'm
think
reading the commentary here. I'm reading a commentary now here. He says that Moses says, "You're right. That's actually what God told me."
how come
But
that wasn't a little more clearer, maybe, like for
he
the base
says,
reader?
Moses didn't say, "I didn't hear this law." Moses could have said, "Look," he could have either said, Moses could have said, "This is the way he's bringing out from the Talmud here." Moses could have said, "I never heard it," but you know what? That's a good assumption. According to the Gemara in Zvachim in the Talmud says he had so much gut, like he was an honest person that he said, "Yes, you're right. This is what Hashem said." Vayita Beinov. He says, you're right. This is exactly what God told me." He said, "I did hear and I forgot it." It's not just the leader. I guess that's one level to say, you know what? It's a good calculation. You're right. He said, no. He says to Aaron, he says, not just you're right, but that's actually what God told me. And that's what Rashi's saying. He was embarrassed. Because the truth is, if God never told him anything, then what's the big deal of him not being embarrassed? He never got the info. What do you want from Moses? So Rashi's saying, because the words Vayita Be'enav means, he says, yes, you're right. It's good in my eyes. Yeah, you know where we have it? I think in the Megillah. I think by Haman. Am I making this up here? By Haman and yes, we have it when when Haman told Achashverosh to kill all the Jews. I think it says over there that Achashverosh was very happy, and he said, "Yes, it was good. It was a good idea. He likes your idea very much. I agree with you very strongly that we should kill all the Jewish people." In the Megillah, in the story when Haman wanted to destroy all the Jews with Achashverosh, and Haman suggested the idea to Achashverosh, Achashverosh says, "Vayitav ve'inav," not just to kill. Oh no, Zeresh. I'm sorry. When Haman's wife. I don't want to talk off the bat here, but when Zeresh told her husband Haman to kill all the Jews, he agreed. He said something like that. Anyway, I don't want to talk here without just from guessing, so I don't make a mistake. But yeah, something along those lines.